So Madame Alexander had weathered her early childhood. She'd weathered the experimental years of her cloth dolls in the beginning of the industry, the grand success of the Dione quintuplets, the other celebrity dolls. She did the wonderful childhood dolls. And now the war was finally over, and Madame had access to luxury materials and products and a burgeoning, prosperous American society, so she could introduce what was her real dream, beautiful fashion dolls, known as the Portrait Series. The most significant of the Portrait Series was probably that introduced in 1946, in which she did some really exquisite dolls. They are so extraordinarily rare, almost impossible to find, done in very limited editions at the very beginning. And, well, like all things of that time, their value and their rarity today is contingent upon their having been preserved well, and not all were. So here are some extraordinary examples from the Rodney Waller collection, unbelievable to find in one place at one time, this entire group. Right here on my right-hand side is the model that was marketed as Judy, and she was inspired by Judy Garland from her film role in the 1944 film Meet Me in St. Louis. And I turn it around because one of the things you always have to look at with these dolls, sure, first thing you see is the entire doll, but then you've got to start looking at the details. You've got to look at the way these ruffles were done, with pleats, with little loop ties on the end, with little intermingled silk flowers, and then gathered in this incredible swirl and all around, appearing all around the gown. Absolutely extraordinary. And then the flowers repeated at various places on the dress and in this wonderful coronet in her hair. So this was Judy. She was one of the favorites. It's always fascinating to me to try to imagine why a certain film or a certain person would have inspired Madame Alexander to produce a doll that would be, if not a licensed doll per se, certainly inspired by that person or by a film role in which they appeared. Which brings us to one of the mystery dolls of the Portrait Series. This stunning, stunning red-haired doll in black velvet with her very beautiful costuming. And again, look at her earrings. Her earrings are matching the brooch on her dress. She has wonderful details that way. I'm going to turn her around so you can see her all the way around. These costumes, this is of a gorgeous velvet material. These costumes were so almost impossible to get during the 30s because of the Depression, and then later in the 40s because of the war years. And now they were going to become available again, and Madame was going to really fulfill her lifelong dream of making exquisite fashion dolls. Each one of these wigs had to be incredibly hand-styled on these dolls. And here she comes around again. Doll also has a muff. Now the muff is a bit worn, so we have it kind of packed in archival papers for you to have, but not to show. And the doll has her original Cloverleaf award, a fashion emblem, not a fashion award, but a fashion emblem that she put on these particular dolls. The mystery is who made this doll. There is some conjecture that she actually represents Greta Garbo. Now, Greta Garbo was really famous in her role in Romance, which is the name of this doll. It was marketed as Romance, and Greta Garbo's role in Romance was nearly 8 or 10 years earlier, but perhaps it had inspired Madame, had always stuck with her, and she had that in her mind when she did this doll. Research yet to be done, so let's get on it, folks, and do that. On either side, we have two of the rarest and most stunning portrait dolls that Madame did. First of all, we have on my left-hand side, this doll is absolutely magnificent. I cannot say enough about her. First of all, look at the painting on her face. Very, very dramatic, hand-painted details, entirely different than what I would call her general commercial line of fashionable dolls at the time. Very dramatic eyeshadow, very dramatic painting of the eyelashes, very, very different. Gorgeous hair, beautifully styled, look at that. And then the costume, unbelievable. This was a doll that was marketed as her June bride, and even the train that comes down and is so extensive and long is in perfectly preserved condition. I don't think there is a portrait doll that exists anywhere in the world from this time period in this genre that is in such remarkable condition as this one is. I love her garland of flowers she's holding in her hand. She has her 3-strand pearl necklace, her wonderful little rose at her bodice, a stunning doll in every way. On her other side, that was in 1946. On this side, created just 1 year later, and very similar. I have to admit, I keep going back and forth to try to remember which is which, but this was the doll known as Royal Wedding. And it was done, what happened in Royal Wedding? 1946, England, Elizabeth and Philip married. And so this doll was put out to honor their wedding. And it has a lot of variations with the other one, but a lot of similarities as well. They both have these wonderful flounces. They both have the cascading lilies in their hands, a lily bouquet. Wonderful. Oh my, this hair and the little flowers coming from it are just absolutely extraordinary. And I'm going to show you a few more dolls from the portrait series. So showing more dolls from the 1946 portrait series that came out. On the far left, with the beautiful turquoise beads cascading onto her shoulder, is Lady Windermere. And when I said that it's interesting to try to conjecture why she picked certain people to make her dolls of, I don't know. Lady Windermere's Fan was an Oscar Wilde play that had come out in the late 1800s, but had been continued to be popular because Lady Windermere was this kind of sassy society lady, and she was famous for such famous lines as "I can resist anything except temptation itself." So someone that obviously inspired her. Wonderful detail of her hair, including the turquoise beads draped around her hair, the beads cascading onto her arms and then repeated in the earrings, and the purple banner coming down her front side. In the back, we have Renoir with her bright pink bow, her hair with that wonderful stylized hat of that late 1800s period, where it would be perched high on the head and then shown, dipping down into the front, sort of like a crown on top of an elaborate hairstyle. Again, wonderfully painted face, rich brown eyes, and a very dramatic costume with black lace, fingerless gloves, all of these little details. You have to look at these dolls to really consider them. In the front is the magnificent Antoinette, obviously inspired by Marie Antoinette and obviously wearing a gown of that time period. I'm going to just turn her a little this way so you can get a little more of the gown and see the detail of it. Look at these wonderful applique flowers that are on the gown, very different. Gilt metallic bows, wonderful silk wired flowers. Everything about them was so intricate. And let me just turn her so you can see the back, because I want to show you something. This dress had the built-in panniers, which was of the style of the time. And here's a secret of these portrait dolls of the 1946 period. The dresses were made with zippers. This is the only time, and it is so different and so unusual. And they also have, if you notice, they also have, well, you can see it in her, this very developed bosom. And in the dresses were built in like little metallic rings to give form and shape to the gowns. So there's so much in the construction of these dresses that give them their great detail. And behind her is standing Princess Flavia from the Prisoner of Zenda, which was a film that had come out and was a great favorite of the madam. And she produced the princess doll with her very elaborate bejeweled, not real jewels of course, bejeweled crown and her purple velvet sash. And we'll turn her so you can see her a little bit from this side as well. And you can see how the sash comes down, has this beautiful ruby brooch right in the middle of it there. Very interesting. If I lift this up, you can see a little more. Let me come over here and show you a little more lace on the inside. And if you had her undressed, you would see that this is a lace bodice, a sleeveless lace bodice that is under the gown. Everything about these was so meticulous. It almost was like a couturier shop in that for real people, in how intricately each of these pieces was designed. We see the beginning of interest of Madame in the Gone with the Wind film, or the continuing interest of it, and you're going to see a little more examples of that later on. But from this portrait series, we have the lady at the front who is Scarlett, and I really have got to turn her around so you can see her hat, her bonnet from the side. And look at, again, this very, very well-shaped bosom with the metal set in forms. And look at that bonnet. It's absolutely wonderful. She has an actual hoop under her gown to give the dress form. And next to her, of course, her arch rival for all of her life, Melanie. Melanie, to me, has the portrait series. I personally love her facial painting more than any of them. Very, very dramatic, very beautifully done. Little extra side curls on the lashes, wonderful dark eyeshadow. She's probably a little more sultry than actually Margaret Mitchell portrayed her in the book, but as a doll, she is stunning. And look at, again, the side of her hat. I'm going to tip it over. And then we have, finally, two examples of Carmen. The whole concept of the Spanish dancer was very, very, had to be very strong with Madame, because she had produced a whole series of Carmen dolls based on Carmen, who introduced them in the 1930s. But these are of an earlier style. These were based on the opera Carmen, and everything about the dress, the style, the very dramatic painting of the eyebrows. Look at her dramatic painting of her eyebrows here. Very, very different than anything you see any other place. Look again at the style of the hair, the elaborate woven braids. And if we turn her around, and I lift her veil at the back, you can see that the elaborate coiffure continues in the back, along with the cascade of beautiful, just beautiful silk flowers. Madame was known for searching out and finding suppliers that could offer her the best product. And then the cascade of roses on black velvet coming down the gown, and that is repeated on her sister doll in black. So both of these from that 1946 series. These dolls are so extraordinarily rare, and what is important about them is they really signal Madame's, her tour de force, which were the portrait dolls, and which now continue from the 1940s, continue into the 1950s and create her stupendous portrait series from the 1950s that would go on to win the Fashion Academy Awards for dolls and really represent American style. I want to show you in closing on this part 4. Dolls that didn't fit any of the categories I was talking to you about today, but that I just really like. And this concludes my videos for the Rodney Waller collection of Madame Alexander dolls, the cloth and composition years. I just have a little group in front of you just to enjoy as the camera sweeps over them, because I couldn't show every single doll in this 300 lot auction. They are extraordinary. And here are just a few that don't fit any of the particular categories I talked about, but I wanted you to see them because they are, oh, just look at them. I mean, not only were they beautifully made at the time, but that they have been preserved in this condition all of these years is just absolutely remarkable. And it's a privilege to have handled them, and it will be for you, if you love this kind of dolls, if you love American childhood, remember, Madame Alexander, one of the major forces in the entire doll industry in America, one of the first important American entrepreneurs in developing the doll industry, a really significant person. I don't want to hear any collector say, I don't collect Madame Alexander dolls. If you love beautiful dolls, if you love cloth, if you love composition, if you love celebrity, if you like popular culture, if you like just beautiful dolls, you should be looking at, if not wanting to have in your home, a beautiful doll by Madame Alexander. How could you resist? Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you at the auction.